Now we have the third panelist, Joseph Meissner. Meissner will be giving another 15-minute talk, and we'll go for the question and answer session.
Merhaba. Assalamu alaikum. Some people wonder whether someone from my tradition, Roman Catholic, can say Salam alaikum. And last time I saw the Pope, I asked him, is it okay to say that? And Pope Francis told me, well, Christ, used to say, peace be with you, so I guess it's all right for me to greet you, Salam alaikum. Second concern I have today is posed by my director of our foundation called the Friendship Foundation in Cleveland. And she says, well, who is your audience? And you see, I don't know who you are. So, and maybe you don't know each other either. So I've got 5 questions I'm going to begin with. The first question is this: how many of you have been to Turkey? Oh, look at that. By the way, would anyone volunteer to say what is the national motto of Turkey? Do we have anybody courageous enough? Come on, there must be somebody.
I'm Turkish. I'm not if I'm qualified to say that. It's Ne mutlu Türk'üm diyene.
Say it again.
Ne mutlu Türk'üm diyene.
Yes, and to translate that in English, not Kurdish.
I don't know Kurdish though. I don't know how to do it. Is there anyone who could?
What
go
can
ahead.
you do to be a Turk?
Yes, all right.
Yeah.
Or the one who can say, I am a Turk, how grand.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, who did that come from? Does anyone know that?
Our founder.
Who
Is
is?
Turk?
Right.
The father
Okay.
of Turks.
So I can't make that claim, but I can say that I've been to Turkey, and last year under the Niagara Foundation I had an opportunity to go there. And I can still remember it's evening, about 4 o'clock, and that's the time in Istanbul when all the major highways turn into parking lots, right? See, you laugh, you know what I'm talking about. And I can remember looking up on the right there, and it's very dark, and I look up high at the building that's above there, above the wall, of Theodosius, and there is a big, huge sign and lights, Hizmet, service. So that's kind of a goal for all of us. Well, that's question number 1. Question number 2. How many of you have heard of Fethullah Gulen? Oh boy, see that? I was going to give a nice 2-hour lecture on who he is. Oh yeah, I can scrap that. Anyway, I asked, and I kept track of this over the last couple months, 54 of my friends who claim to be knowledgeable. And do you know how many could identify Fethullah Gulen? Only 3. Now, if I'd asked those people, who's Dr. Martin Luther King? They all raised their hand. And if I asked them, who's Mahatma Gandhi? All raised their hand. But here is a man, Fethullah Gulen, who should be known at least as well as Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi, who preaches also a gospel of tolerance and peace and brotherhood and sisterhood, and we in America don't know who he is. And I ask myself, and this gets to what I worry about with the trial that I think the Gulenists are going to face in Turkey. I ask myself, why is that? Why in America don't we know more about Fethullah Gulen and Hizmet? And I have some feelings about that. You may say these are prejudices, but one of them is the reason we don't know enough about Fethullah Gulen is because he comes from the Islamic tradition. I hope that isn't true. The other impression I have is the reason we don't know about Fethullah Gulen is we don't know about Turkey, nor its predecessor, the Ottoman Empire. Well, okay, that's question 2. Question 3. This comes out of the fact that the Hizmet movement is dedicated to dialogue. And it's not just an internal dialogue with your friends and your family or those that know and believe the same as you do, but people who may believe totally different ideas than yours. Does anybody know the tradition about people who are Jewish in the Ottoman Empire? Does anybody remember after the, well, you wouldn't remember that far back, but after the Reconquista in 1492, Spain said that all who were Muslim and all who were Jewish either must convert or leave. And the Ottoman Emperor, or Sultan, said, you know, if Spain is stupid enough to expel 100,000 of its best citizens, we in the Ottoman Empire are smart enough to welcome them all. So, my second question is, third question, is there anybody here who comes from a background of being in the Jewish tradition? Good. All right. Met our quota. No. The idea of the third question is that Hizmet and the Gulen movement reaches out to everybody. Fourth question. How many here come from a Christian tradition, whether Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant? Do we have anybody? Well, you know, there are many different kinds of Catholics, and I'm sure I'm going to offend half the audience to tell you what kind of a Catholic I am. In Roman Catholicism, there's an idea that every human life begins when the sperm from the father meets the egg from the mother, and that's the beginning and conception of a new human life. And so, my view is, if anybody proposes to take that human life, whether in the womb or outside the womb, you better have a very good reason. So anyway, that's question number 4. And now we get to the 5th question. How many of you here come from a Muslim background, whether Sufi, Sunni, or Shia? Good. In America, unfortunately, there is a bias or prejudice among a lot of people, including some of my close friends, about people who come from an Islamic tradition. And I only tell them, find your Washington Post, and you can find it on Google, for September 12th, 2001. Does anybody know what you'll find there?
An advertisement.
Pardon me?
An advertisement from Gulen.
Yes, and what does it say?
Rejecting and opposing the attack.
Right. And in there, there's this very famous, and I quote this to all my friends when I talk with them, no terrorist can be a Muslim, and no true Muslim can be a terrorist.
Yes.
Right. So that's something when you run up against some of your friends who don't have much knowledge of Gulen or Turkey or Islam, to point out to them. Well, today I want to separate my speech into 2 parts. How many minutes do I have left? 8? Okay, so 4 and 4, right? By the way, don't look at your watches. You're going to think I'm supposed to be in the middle of lunch. You know? So this is the spiritual food, okay? So we are having lunch. Well, the first part of what I want to talk to you about is human rights under attack in Turkey. And the reason I bring that up is because that's the second part of my speech as to how the Hizmet movement is under attack in Turkey because of human rights. So, human rights. How many people know about the Kurdish people in Turkey? I don't have to give a 2-hour lecture on their background. All of you know the PKK? Everybody know PKK? The PKK had some good parts to it, and I'm afraid a lot of bad parts. It was actually a movement that used terrorism as a tool to try to assert the rights of people who are Kurdish. And an awful lot of Kurdish people did not believe in the PKK. But from 1984 to 2013, when there was some kind of a truce worked out, in those years the PKK led a movement that probably its ultimate goal was to split off part of Turkey into a Kurdistan, uniting it with the Kurds that are in Iraq and other places in the Middle East. This was not an academic exercise. Does anybody know roughly how many people lost their lives in that effort of the PKK? It's over 40,000 lost their life. Those were people who have Turkish backgrounds and Kurdish backgrounds. Well, for many years, people didn't want to discuss this. It was sort of buried. Once in a while, the government would try to do something, try to go after those that were responsible. That included not only people who were with PKK, but it also included, unfortunately, people who were within the security apparatus of Turkey, the police and the military. Finally, one of the people who was in jail wrote a letter. And he was in southeastern Turkey. And he claimed that he had been present when some other people who were in the apparatus of the security, the police, had actually taken people, tortured them, and eventually killed them. And they become either bodies that were found or totally disappeared. How many people here have heard of, and I'll spell it, my Turkish is wonderful, T-E-M-I-Z-O-Z, the Temizot trial? Anybody here has heard of that? T-E-M-I-Z-O-Z. The Temizot trial came out of that snitch whatever you want to call him, who wrote the letter saying he had seen all these bad things, and the prosecution, being pushed by the families of those that had disappeared, insisted there be some kind of bringing up the human rights of those that had been killed and somehow bringing to trial those that had done it. Eventually there were 7 defendants accused of the crime. The prosecutor indicted them. And of those 7, the top one was a man named Simo, C-E-M-A-L, Temizo, T-E-M-I-Z-O-Z. Now the thing about Temizo is he eventually rose up to one of the higher ranks in the Turkish military and eventually became a colonel. And I, as a colonel, I can appreciate his being a colonel. He was in charge of that area. And there were 20 bodies that they came up with that had been killed or disappeared. And he, along with the others, were prosecuted for having done something that led to the deaths of those people. And there were even stories that when the relatives had come in to complain to him, that he would tell them, be careful, you saw what happened to your relatives, that could happen to you. Well, anyway, here's this big trial that's been going on, by the way, 2009, still going on. It's one of the benefits or disadvantages of Turkish justice. It goes on forever. Well, anyway, at the hearings of that, the question was to the defendants, what did you do and why did you do it? And here was Colonel Temizo, and he took the hard line. Why did that have to be done? He was trying to protect Turkey from being dismembered. And of course that's been a constant theme going back at least to the British interfering in Greece back into the 1820s or so. But a constant theme to dismember the Ottoman Empire and then Turkey. So anyway, that's what he said he was doing. He said, I saved that area. So he was using his violations of people's rights and using that in some way to protect Turkey. All right, there are a lot of lessons that come out of the Temizo, and I have those in my paper that you can get those ideas and lessons. I say that we should study what happened there, because my fear is that that's what's going to be happening to the Gulenists now. And that brings me to the second part of what I want to talk about, and that is the present legal situation in Turkey. Now, in order to understand the Gulenist movement and why it's being indicted, there are 4 important background pieces that you need to know. Number 1, what is the Gulen position on human rights? It's not just that those rights are in the Constitution or the Supreme Court, Jim was saying. Those rights go right into the heart of what the Islamic religion is about, the individual. And there's a saying in the Quran that if you take the life of one man, you're taking the life of all mankind. And if you save the life of one man, you are saving humankind. Well, that's human rights, number 1. Number 2, terrorism. Everything that Gulen has ever said or people associated with the movement is opposed to terrorism. Not a tool, not an end. No matter what your goal is, it should never be used. Number 3, what is the role of religion in the government? Should people of a certain religious background, Islamic or whatever, try to take over, try to become the government? Gulen does not want to see religion used in that way. And fourth and finally, what is the Hizmet idea about minorities? Again here, there's a recognition that minorities should have some kind of rights. And their particular languages, their cultures ought to be recognized in some way within society. So those are 4 pillars. We could develop each one of those. But there they are, the 4. And when you get to what's happened right now with Erdogan and the indictments of the prosecutor against Hizmet, against the Gulenists, what is the charge against them? The charge against them, against Gulen himself, the charge is that this is a terrorist organization intent upon overthrowing the government and doing something to destroy Turkey. You have to say, well, can you prove that in any way at all? Where is the evidence? Where are the words? Where are the books? Where are the newspapers that back that up? How many issues of Zeman can you find where anything like that is said? On the other hand, just because we can laugh at somebody who's trying to tell Nigeria what to do with schools, we better be aware that this man, Erdogan, and the people around him, that those are Turks. And by that I mean when I come across people who tell me they're Turks, they really have that idea that it is grand to be a Turk. And that's what this man is. And he is also following in the footsteps of our friend, Temizov, from that trial I talked about. He's going to be stubborn and obstinate, and he's going to go after everybody. And he has called that even within the scientific community of Turkey, there are traitors that he's going to eliminate. And as people in other countries have made remarks and commentary, like from the European Union, he has said, keep your wisdom to yourself. All right. So he is going to keep going and doing what he's doing. And what does that mean for us? Well, we can't just leave today and say, well, we don't have to worry about this. We've got our media. They're going to uncover what's going on. Our media is going to be able to tell us about Fethullah Gulen. Don't count on it. You have got to, when you leave the room today, have an idea that you're going to make certain that your news media, your TV stations, that they're going to be able to tell the truth, and that they're going to tell the truth. Let me just end. 1 minute. Do I have a minute?
1 minute.
1 minute. I've told you that I think this is a very strong kind of threat. Threat to the people in Turkey, threat to people in other countries in terms of Hizmet, in terms of the Gulenists. What's going to happen? Most lawyers usually, unless you pay them a great sum of money, don't like to give predictions. But here's mine. I'm an optimist. I believe that good eventually triumphs over evil, even though it may take a long time. After all, time itself belongs to Allah and to God. And I believe even more that Turkish presidents and their families can avoid hell and Satan, and that they can be saved. So even Erdogan can be saved. But of course, I believe they also will have to pay for their bad deeds by serving a long sentence in a place that we Catholics own and manage. It's called purgatory. And so for Erdogan and his family and all those that have done something wrong, they ought to tell us what they've done. And they ought to be prepared for the fact that human rights violations, just like for the Kurds, human rights violations are not something that are ever forgotten, but eventually have to be acknowledged. So, thank you very much, and let me put it this way. Teşekkür, right? And for any Kurds in the audience, Zor Supat, and finally, Gule Gule.
So just to summarize